Before Vice Admiral Shoji Nishimura entered Surigao Strait, he already knew what was waiting for him. A scout plane from the cruiser Mogami had come back in daylight with the Count. Battleships near the mouth of Leyte Gulf, cruisers behind them, destroyers across the approaches, small boats scattered through the darkness like teeth in the water. The passage was not open. It was being held, and Nishimura still ordered his flagship to keep her speed. That is the part that has never sat comfortably in the record, because this was not a commander blundering into a trap he could not see. This was a commander who had been told, before sunset, that the trap was there. Then he sailed into it anyway. The map made the idea look almost elegant. Japan's fleet would close on the American invasion force at Leyte like two fists. Admiral Takeo Kurita would bring the heavy center force down through San Bernardino Strait from the north. Yamato was with him. So were the other big ships Japan still had left. Nishimura would come from the south, up through Surigao Strait, and strike the landing area from below before dawn. Hammer from one side, anvil from the other. On paper, it was a coordinated blow. At sea, it was already coming apart. By October 1944, the Imperial Japanese Navy was no longer choosing from strength. It was gathering what still floated. Nishimura's two battleships, Yamashiro and Fuso, were veterans of another age. They had been launched during the First World War, dragged from training duty because the Empire had run out of better answers. Their guns were 14-inch rifles. Their fire control gear belonged to an older war. Neither had ever fought the kind of fleet action they were about to enter. Around them steamed the heavy cruiser Mogami and four destroyers, Michishio, Asagumo, Yamagumo, and Shigure. 7 ships. That was the Southern Fist. And it was being asked to punch through a doorway held by an entire American battle line. Nishimura was not a reckless young officer chasing glory. He was a destroyer officer by trade, trained, disciplined, and known for one quality above the rest. He carried out orders exactly as they were written, not loosely, not politically. Not only when they made sense, exactly. That was why the men around him understood the course before they understood the odds. If the order said reach Leyte Gulf by 4 in the morning, then he would try to reach Leyte Gulf by 4 in the morning. If the channel ahead was blocked, then the channel ahead was where the battle would happen. There was another shadow on the bridge that night. 3 years earlier, Nishimura's son Teiji, a young naval aviator, had been killed during operations tied to these same islands. Now the father was steaming back toward the Philippines in the dark, leading 2 obsolete battleships into the narrow water below Leyte. No record can prove what that meant to him, but it is hard to believe it meant nothing. At the far end of the strait, Rear Admiral Jesse Oldendorf had solved the same problem from the opposite direction. He did not need romance. He did not need an even fight. He needed a kill zone. Oldendorf had 6 battleships waiting across the northern mouth of Surigao Strait. 5 were Pearl Harbor veterans, ships that had been sunk, damaged, repaired, raised, modernized, and sent back into war. West Virginia, California, Tennessee, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Mississippi completed the line. With them were cruisers, including the Australian cruiser Shropshire, 28 destroyers, and dozens of PT boats spread down the throat of the channel. It was not just a force, it was a system. The small boats would find the Japanese. The destroyers would cut into them with torpedoes. The cruisers would add gunfire. The battleships would wait at the top and fire broadside across the opening, layer after layer. Oldendorf later described the spirit of it in gambler's terms. Never give the other man a fair chance if he is foolish enough to give you an unfair one. He had another reason to end the fight quickly. His battleships had spent much of their armor-piercing ammunition supporting the Leyte landings. He did not want a long-range duel that left his line hungry and exposed to Japanese torpedoes. So he built the battle so the enemy would have to bleed before the big guns ever spoke. The geography helped him. Surigao Strait narrowed near the top. Any force coming north had little room to spread out. It would enter in column, one ship behind another. Oldendorf set his battle line across the head of that column. The Americans could fire with nearly everything. The Japanese could answer mostly with the guns facing forward. It was the old naval dream, crossing the T, the maneuver every battleship admiral studied, and almost none ever got to perform. Surigao Strait would become the last time it happened in battle. But before the big ships fired, the night belonged to smaller shadows. At 10:36 p.m., a PT boat's radar picked up shapes moving up the dark water. The Japanese saw the boats too. Star shells opened above the sea. Searchlights combed the black surface. Japanese guns snapped awake before the little boats could line up clean shots. PT-152 was hit and burned. PT-130 took a shell that punched in and failed to explode. PT-493 was torn open by 3 hits. One sailor, Albert Brunel, did the kind of thing that disappears in large battle maps. He jammed his own life jacket into a hole in the hull and held it there long enough for the boat to survive. The PT boats did not stop Nishimura. They barely damaged him. But they did what Oldendorf needed first. They found him. They reported him. They pulled the string tight. After that, the Strait began working on the Japanese column even before the Americans did. In the confusion near Limasawa, Mogami rejoined the battleships, and Fuso mistook her for an enemy ship. At close range, Japanese shells slammed into Japanese steel. Men died from their own side's fire before the main ambush had even begun. Then came the destroyers. Around 3 in the morning, American destroyer squadrons moved in from both sides of the channel. Captain Jesse Coward had fought Japanese night tactics before. He knew what the long-lance torpedo could do. He knew that if the Japanese got their weapons away first, the price would be enormous. So his ships attacked without announcing themselves. No dramatic gunfire, no long exchange, just black shapes moving on the flanks, releasing torpedoes into the path of the column. The Japanese had wakes to shoot at and very little else. The hits came almost together. Yamagumo blew apart and disappeared. Michishio was crippled. Asagumo lost her bow. Fuso was struck and torn out of the line, burning so fiercely her wreck lit the water around her. The southern force was not yet at the American battleships. It was already dying. And Yamashiro, Nishimura's flagship, had been hit too. A torpedo slammed into her amidships. Water poured in. 2 after turrets were drowned out by flooding. Her list grew, then eased enough for her to keep moving. On the bridge, Nishimura did not turn back. He sent a message that sounded less like a status report than a verdict. Enemy torpedo boats and destroyers on both sides of the northern entrance. 2 destroyers torpedoed and drifting. Yamashiro hit by 1 torpedo. Then the phrase that explained everything and nothing. Fit for battle. Fit for battle meant the ship was wounded. Fit for battle meant the formation was broken. Fit for battle meant 1 battleship was gone, destroyers were burning, and the enemy lines still waited ahead. But the compass still pointed north, so Yamashiro kept going. By then, the American battle line was watching her on radar. In West Virginia's plot, the contact appeared far out in the dark, then closed. The ship held fire until the range fell to about 23,000 yards. The Japanese could not see the line. The Americans did not need to see the Japanese with their eyes. At 3:51 a.m., West Virginia fired. 16-inch shells rose into a black sky and came down on a ship whose gunners were still trying to fight by flashes and guesses. California opened. Tennessee opened. The cruisers joined in. For 18 minutes, American shells poured down the axis of the strait. For part of that time, Yamashiro was the main thing left worth shooting. She fired back. She turned her guns toward muzzle flashes. She threw shells into darkness. But the battle was not equal in any meaningful sense. It was radar against smoke, broadside against bow, a prepared gate against a column already cut to pieces. This was the textbook maneuver come alive, but the strange thing is how small it looked by then. The famous crossed T did not crush a fleet in line. It crushed what remained of one. A burning battleship, a damaged cruiser, a single destroyer still moving through the wreckage. Around 4:09 a.m., confusion struck the American side. The destroyer Albert W. Grant was hit badly in the middle of the action, including by friendly fire, as shells and torpedoes crossed the dark. Oldendorf ordered a check fire so his ships could clear the water. For a few minutes the guns fell silent, and in that silence Yamashiro was still there. She was burning along her decks. She had taken torpedo damage. Her formation had been destroyed behind her. Then she began turning south. It might have looked like retreat, but Nishimura's last message did not sound like retreat. He told his commander that he would proceed toward Leyte for the main attack. He said they would continue until annihilation. He insisted the mission had been carried out as arranged. It was one of the coldest messages of the Pacific War, because it refused the obvious meaning of the scene. The attack had failed. The force was gone. The route was closed. And Nishimura still framed the act of continuing as obedience completed. Then the torpedoes found Yamashiro again. 2 more hit near the starboard engine room. The list worsened. The old battleship rolled farther and farther until her decks became walls. The abandoned ship order went through what remained of the crew. Nishimura stayed inside the conning tower with his chief of staff. There was no final speech preserved, no grand answer, no explanation of whether he believed victory was still possible or whether obedience had become the last thing left to command. Yamashiro turned over and went down by the stern, vanishing from the American radar scopes in roughly 2 minutes. Somewhere around 4:20 in the morning, the flagship was gone. She had carried more than 1,600 men. 10 survived. Others were seen in the water, coated in oil, exhausted, alive, and refusing rescue. That detail is almost harder to understand than the charge itself. A ship can be ordered into a strait. A crew can be trained to obey. A battle can be lost by geometry, radar, torpedoes, and timing. But men in the water, making their own final refusals, belong to a darker world than tactics. Behind Nishimura, Admiral Shima's force came up late. They entered the southern approach and found fire on the water. Two great burning shapes drifted in the strait. Shima believed he was seeing the wrecks of both of Nishimura's battleships. He was not. He was seeing the two halves of Fuso. That was enough. Shima turned away. The southern attack on Leyte Gulf was finished. Oldendorf lost one PT boat and 39 men that night. Nishimura lost almost everything he led in. Of the 7 ships that entered Surigao Strait under his command, only Shigure escaped the immediate slaughter. 3 months later, an American submarine sank her off Malaya. The last survivor of the column did not survive the war. That leaves the question people still return to. Why did Nishimura keep going? The simple answer is orders. The colder answer is doctrine. The human answer is harder. He had been told what waited ahead. He knew the ships under him were old. He knew coordination with the other Japanese forces had failed. He knew daylight would bring American aircraft. He knew the passage was narrow enough to make retreat and advance feel almost equally fatal. And still, he drove north. Maybe he believed a night action gave his men their last possible advantage. Maybe he believed slowing would only let aircraft finish him later. Maybe he believed the operation demanded someone hit the gate, even if the gate was shut. Maybe, by then, duty had become less a choice than a rail laid under the keel. No one came back from Yamashiro's bridge to tell us. What remains is the shape of the act. A scout plane brings the count. An admiral accepts it. Old ships enter a narrow strait. An American line waits in the dark. The torpedoes cut. The radar guns open. The flagship burns, turns, and sinks. The sea closed over the answer before dawn, and the last battleship charge did not end with a breakthrough. It ended with a man steering into a wall he had already seen.